Creating a Family, talk about foster, adoptive, and kinship care. I'm Dawn Davenport. I am the host of this show and the director of the nonprofit creatingafamily.org. Today's show is going to be about what foster care alumni want us to know. Needless to say, they are the true experts on what being in foster care is like. We will be talking today with Dave Armstrong, Shalina Tate, Dr. Kay Kaiser, and Dr. Sarah Dyson. All are foster care alum. I thought it would be best if we start by letting each of you tell your story of your involvement with foster care and the child welfare system. Dave, let's begin with you. How did you become a foster care alum?
Well, I was actually in the juvenile justice system before the foster care system. So I'm one of the rarities that were dual-hatted as a kid, so to speak. And so my first arrest was when I was 11 and a half years old for felony armed robbery. So that kind of paints a picture of the environment that I grew up in. My mom was never around, really. She was usually drunk and high. My stepfather was always abusing her and myself. And so joining a gang, running the streets was just an escape for me. And so I got picked up when I was 11 and a half years old, sentenced to 2 years at a boys' camp. And while I was my mom was my only family member other than my stepfather, who obviously I wasn't going to go to because he was abusive. So after the 2 years began my journey in the foster care system, where I was just shuffled from one home to another. I was very defiant. I was very abusive. I was physically and verbally just a torture to everyone around me. And of course I would be. I hated everyone. I hated life. I hated God. I hated the universe for doing this to me. And, you look around and you see other people with what you call normal lives and you go, well, why me? Why am I the chosen one that has to have this type of life? I didn't want to join a gang. I didn't want to be homeless. I didn't want any of this, but guess what? You're thrusted into that. And so that was kind of the beginning of, group home, foster home, juvenile detention, that cycle. A lot of our youth suffer even to this day.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Dr. Kaiser, I've asked your permission to call you Kay on this. So, Kay, can you tell us what is your involvement with foster care or the child welfare system?
I was born into the foster care system. My mother she was attending school, learned that she was pregnant, had 3 older siblings, sisters. And in the 1960s, the early 60s, that was not, I'll just call it a no-no for mothers to be pregnant and not be married. And so they gave her advice to place me for adoption. And so she went and stayed at like a mother's home where she would stay there until she gave birth. And then I was automatically just handed over to the Michigan Department of Social Services and grew up in that system till I was 18 years old.
So you were never adopted, even as an infant?
I learned after I came back from the military that I was adopted. Nobody ever told me. It was a secret. I learned accidentally through someone that shared the information with me that apparently was supposed to hold on to it.
So you did, just to make sure I'm clear here, that you grew up in changing foster homes, or were you placed with one family and stayed with them for the entire time?
I changed foster homes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I moved quite often.
So at some point you were adopted, so you stayed with that family, or did you continue to move?
Yes, ma'am. I stayed with that family until I graduated from high school, and then I joined the military.
Okay. Sarah, or Dr. Dyson, I've gotten your permission to call you Sarah. What is your involvement? What was your involvement with the foster care system?
Yeah, I would be curious if Dr. Kaiser also shares this really strong dual perspective of her experience. I was in and out of the system probably from age 4 to 17 when I just left. I come from a long line of generational poverty and generational abuse. I've never met my mother. She was, out of the picture immediately after I was born. And my father, I believe, suffered from some learning disabilities and, some issues with his cognitive functioning. And so I had a very abusive stepmom. I was often removed due to severe physical abuse or neglect. We were often homeless. It was, very difficult for my father to keep a job. He couldn't read or write very well. He didn't graduate high school. And so I mostly bounced back and forth between, a kinship placement and reunification, or a foster placement and reunification, with an incredibly high degree of mobility. I was just in and out all the time. I think for me, I can't, and most of us probably don't look back on those experiences with like positive feelings. Some of my worst days were the ones where the social workers would come in and then they would leave without me. And then, on the other hand of it, they would drop me off with very estranged family members I've never met, or, complete strangers I've never met. And so, while technically safer, not a whole lot better from, an emotional standpoint as a kid. And now this is what I research, right, for a living. So I'm deeply invested, in exploring child welfare issues. So I carry with me the systems level researcher lens. And, I think maybe that's why I do what I do, to try to understand my own experience and how could those things happen to me and to the people sitting here with us today, and to children, today, tomorrow, and in the future. I never imagined that I would be in this position. So it's been a really tough experience for sure.
All right, Shalina Tate, we'll round it out with you and then we'll go into some other questions. So what was your experience? How did you come to be involved with the foster care and the child welfare system?
Yes, and hello, everyone. Thank you for having us as well, Ms. Dawn. It's good to see Dr. Kaiser and Dave Armstrong. I know both of them. Sarah, thank you for mentioning generational. That's another video. For me, I basically was removed by age 3 from my situation where both my parents lost their parental rights. Growing up later on in my research, my mom was classified schizophrenic. My father was, they called it normal in the 80s to be 25 and she's 16. I don't know, but it was a lot of that. And I was removed for neglect. But much like my fellow colleagues here, I've experienced my own trauma, different forms of abuses and just neglect, which as we go through the foster care system, and then Dr. Katie, she went through adoption and not knowing about that, that can be very traumatic as you get older. But as I've progressed into adulthood, I wanted to, much like Sarah, and Dave and Dr. Kaiser, find out the why and to put a twist on it. You always hear the negative and the you can't achieve and what you can't become because you come from these situations. Yeah. And I started asking leadership and people around me, well, what's the achievement? Where's the achievement storylines? And so, long story short, that's how I dove into my podcast, Foster My Stories. It wants to tell those achievement side and help us find healing. I know Dr. Kaiser, through her writings, her anthologies, want to help others like myself find healing. I'm also one of her authors, Dave Armstrong. He's a coach. And so we bring in all of our resources and knowledge together from our experiences to help those that's still going through and those that have gone through.
Yeah. Let me mention that in the show notes, we will be linking to the anthologies that you just mentioned. The Faces of Foster Care. This is Dr. Kaiser's work, and she's got a number of volumes, 1, 2, and 3, and we will be linking to that. I'll mention that at the end again. Let me take a moment to remind you that we need your questions for our Weekend Wisdom podcast. That is a short form, usually around 5 to 10 minutes, where we answer one of your questions. So please send us your questions to info@creatingafamily.org and then listen to the Weekend Wisdom podcast to hear our answers. It's a really fun podcast and it's short, so check it out. And now back to the show. All right, what I'd like to do now is talk about, because our audience is primarily going to be foster parents or adoptive parents or kinship parents. And so I want to start with something that your foster parent or parents did that helped you cope, something that was good, that was helpful to you in this experience. Okay, I'll let you start. Tell us something good, and then we could come back around if you've got a number of things. We'll start with one and kind of move through the panel.
Creating friendships, the friendships that I had, making sure that they stayed in place.
Friendships with other foster parents or with foster siblings, or friendships in the foster care system in what way?
I would say primarily just like my high school friends,
Gotcha.
making sure that I would stay connected to them.
So your foster parents helped you stay connected to your high school friends or friends that you had made when you made changes and placements?
That is correct.
Honoring the importance of friendships.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes great sense. Sarah, what about you? What was something positive that your foster parents or kinship parents, since you had both placements, that helped you cope?
I think for me, I had one amazing foster family that I got to spend, I think, about 2 years with. And I still consider them my family today above anyone else. And I think the number one thing that they did for me is that they exposed me to a different way of living. Everything that they did was so different than, my family of origin did, or even in a lot of my kinship placements. Because again, there's very much a generational, there were a lot of shared commonalities.
Yeah, generational trauma is real, right?
Yes, absolutely. So just showing me that there's a different way to live life. I was able to observe them and, how they interacted. They valued things like education and autonomy and empathy. They gave me this roadmap to living a different life. I'll share an example. I changed high schools 4 times in 4 years.
Oh, man.
My father couldn't for the life of him understand why I wanted to finish high school. He was like, you need to drop out. You need to get a GED. You need to go start working. That's just what my family of origin did. Education, really wasn't something that they valued. And it really was very much the opposite, I think, often. And so my foster family didn't even have to tell me, hey, that's not a great idea. You should finish high school. They were there to help me with my homework. They were there to talk to my teachers. They were there to make those connections. I saw them support their 2 older children going to college and making sure that they were on track to do what they needed to do. And so I think I really quickly made a lot of connections. So I would say to foster parents, these kids in your home, and I'll speak for myself, but I think it's generally shared, are such amazing observers. And we have to be. We are constantly scanning our environment. Our very survival depended on our ability to read a room and predict behaviors quite often, right? So they are sponges and they are taking it every tiny thing in you do. So even the smallest acts that you can make are really going to have a big impact.
Beautifully said. Okay. Shalina, you share your experience or something positive that happened.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. She said a lot that I can relate to as well. But my very last foster home, she's no longer with us, but dynamic family as a unit, they basically showed me what it meant to be a family, like a real family, meaning they included not just myself, but my other foster siblings, and really anybody from the neighborhood to really have a sense of belonging. So I would say for prospective foster parents that's watching, the importance of meeting your foster youth right where they are. I hear so many people say they want the babies, but they don't remember that the babies come with their own forms of trauma. Yeah. And a lot of people say they don't want the teenagers because they're too difficult, but they need loving homes as well. And for people to meet them right where they are. So I would just say, just day by day, bit by bit, trying to meet your youth right where they are. Also, really getting a grasp of what they're coming in with, the traumas they're coming in with, because that's going to help shape how you help provide for them, especially if you have your own kids. Yeah. The biggest thing I could say is a form of trauma is getting the kids and making them feel as if they're completely separated from your biological kids. If you find ways to include them. I was on my very last foster home. I got a chance to go on my very first cruise. I got to go on family reunions, and that's rare in foster care, a lot of times you're put in a respite care provider or a shoved somewhere. So the biggest thing is making them feel like they belong bit by bit, day by day. That's it.
Words of wisdom. Yeah. Dave, what about you? What was something positive that either one of your group homes or a foster home did that helped you cope?
So, yeah, Don, I've been a motivational speaker. So I go to different nonprofits that are involved with youth that are involved with justice in the justice system, and as well as youth that are in foster care. And I always say, you are the one. And what that means is any caring adult that is working with a youth that is experiencing foster care or is in juvenile detention or in a group home or boys camp can be the catalyst to change within that one person, can be the one that sparks something. And I was fortunate enough to have two of the ones. My CASA, my court-appointed special advocate, Ron Barnick, and then Sensei Otto Johnson, my martial arts instructor, who happened to be a therapist at one of the group homes that I was at. And they both sparked a 24-year career in the Air Force that Ron was a pilot in, my CASA, and then sparked 3 martial arts schools and thousands of youth and adults mentored and taught by me because of Sensei Otto Johnson. And so what they both did, and this is for every caring adult out there working with youth in any capacity, you have to show that you care. You have to really understand and try to empathize. And it's very difficult sometimes because, thank God, there's not a lot of people that have been in our situation. There's not a lot of kids. There's 400,000 in the United States, but compared to the millions of kids in the United States, that's not a lot, which is good. That's what we want. We want people, children, youth, to be brought up in a good environment, right? And so those that are working with the youths that are displaced, that are in group homes, foster homes, juvenile detention centers, understand that you are the one. You can be the catalyst. And Ron, all he did was show me trinkets from around the world, stuff that he collected on his trips as a pilot in the Air Force. He brought me over to his house when CASAs were allowed to do that back then and showed me stuff on his, I love me wall like I have behind me now. And I bring some of this stuff to my speeches to just emphasize the fact that you have no idea what the one thing is that's going to spark everlasting change. And in my case, not just change within myself, but the thousands, and I don't boastfully say that, of people that I've been able to impact.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll end with, you are the one.
Did you know that Creating a Family has a interactive training or support group curriculum, it can be used either way, for foster, adoptive, and kinship families? It is a really terrific resource. Each of the curriculum is separate. We have 25 in the library. They are turnkey. You take them off the shelf and have everything you need to run a high-quality training or group. It's video-based and interactive. Comes with a video, a facilitator guide, a handout. If you need a certificate of completion, not everybody does, but if you need that for a training, you have that too. So check it out at parentsupportgroups.org. That's parentsupportgroups.org. Thanks for listening to me, and now back to the interview. The one side is the positive, and I wanted to start there because I think that there are so many wonderful foster parents who are doing good things. But what did your foster parents do that made things harder for you? Sarah, let's start with you. And with you, I will also include kinship. So foster or kinship parents.
Absolutely. I think for me, often it was that some really lacked knowledge around adverse childhood events and the impacts of trauma on children, both our mental health and our physical bodies. I had an ACEs score of 8 before I even turned 8 years old. And I'm not sure that all of my placements knew that they were taking in a young child who suffered from complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think there was a lot of the lack of empathy and unwillingness from my perspective to truly understand why I might be displaying or externalizing all of these behaviors, or, why I might be so anxious, withdrawn, or, just overall very distrusting of others. And so, for me, I've accepted that I'm going to carry the weight of that my whole life, right? And I'm okay with that. And I even celebrate some of my own resilience in that. But I do wonder, maybe I wouldn't be sitting here with quite so many of my laundry list of issues, well into my 40s, if there had been more education and training around ACEs and trauma-informed approaches, really pointing at that early intervention around some of my medical, mental, and educational needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the understanding that behaviors are often a symptom, very often a symptom, and that the real finding out the root cause rather than addressing the behavior is an effective way. Kay, what about you? What is something that you would wish that your foster parents had done differently?
I would say discipline rather than punishment.
Oh.
I encountered severity when it came to punishment, like being incarcerated in my bedroom every day after school, after I did all the chores. I would also say food choices, being forced to eat, clean off a plate, eat everything. You didn't even want to eat it, but I have grandchildren now, and I don't make anybody eat anything that they don't want to eat. Not being included, foster children having to go and sit somewhere else instead of being included with the family. Like you sit there and enjoy your food while we sit here and we enjoy our meal with our family.
Our together time, and you are not us, so you sit separately. Shalina also talked about the importance of feeling included. Shalina, what were something that you would wish that your foster parents had done different, or what did they do that made things harder?
Dr. Kaiser is basically hitting the nail on the head. I'm going to piggyback off of what she's saying. Not my very last foster home, which I spoke about. They were amazing, but I've had a few that basically dove into you're clearly the outsider. And if you're treated that way by the foster parents, then it extends to the family, and then it will extend to church, and then it extends to school. So much like what Dr. Kaiser would say, is my trauma extended that way where, like Dr. Kaiser say, when family comes over for the holidays, you're seen as a prize, but when it's time to eat and participate, you go sit over there. You're clearly separated. If we're at church, you're clearly the foster child. It's never you're the daughter. And so I think what I would like to say to prospective foster parents, and I said it earlier, just finding a way to meet your youth right where they are, because that clear separation to them, whether understood or not, adds to trauma that they're already coming in with. And so it's much like Dr. Kaiser's nonprofit organization, K's Carry On. Through the foster care system, we were given trash bags to put our stuff in. But she has this wonderful service that basically meets foster youth aging out and transitioning with luggage. And the luggage replaces the trash bags to help bring back dignity, to not feel like you're belong with trash. And that goes back to what she was saying, and we were saying about feeling included, not feeling like you're an outsider, and feeling like you have worth and you belong.
Dave, what about you? What is something that, if you could go back and talk to a former foster parent or a group home staff, that you would want them to know that they could have done different?
Yeah, something that unfortunately I still remember is more than one caring adult looking in at me and saying that I'll be dead or in prison before I'm 18. You'll be dead or in prison before you're 18. And this was true, but our words matter, right?
Sure.
What we say to our youth matter. And you're fulfilling a destiny for this person when you're saying that.
And would that be the case even if they say it in context of saying you'll be dead or in jail before you turn 18 unless you, because I suspect they would have the unless, but I'm guessing that that's not particularly helpful.
Yeah, I mean, think about how that resonates with you. If I say, Dawn, I don't think you're really worth a lot. And I mean, maybe if you change some of your behavior, you'll
or all of your behavior, change everything you're doing.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't think you're not this podcast thing. I just don't think, with that microphone and that background, I just don't think it's going to ever really be successful. Well, I mean, how impactful is that to you as an adult?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
Imagine a developing teen, saying things like that. So I don't think that many were ill-intended, but it doesn't matter if you're ill-intended or not. I'll share a very brief story that I have in my book. I have an autobiography out there. And
But what's the title? Go ahead and give us a title before. I didn't know that.
I have two of them, From Gangs to Grease and Why Me, My Fight for Life.
Okay.
And I share this story in both of the books. And so there's a young man, a kid, and he's always wanted a pet turtle. And on the way to school one day, he finds a turtle and he says, "Oh my gosh, I have a turtle. I'm gonna take this turtle and I'm gonna take him home." So he runs to the house and he puts the turtle in the bedroom and he closes the door and he says, "Okay, I'm so excited. I can't wait. Oh, wait, before I leave, I gotta feed the turtle." So he goes into the refrigerator and he grabs a piece of meat and he gets some water and he gives the turtle the meat and the water and he closes the bedroom door and he says, "Okay, the turtle's secure in my room. I'm gonna go to school." He runs to school and he's so excited. He can't think of anything else during the school day except getting home and playing with his pet turtle. And so he runs straight after school back home and he sees his turtle there and he's like, "Yes, I got a pet turtle." And he plays with the turtle and he's building obstacle courses for the turtle. And boy, he just has a fantastic time with his turtle. So the next day, same thing. He gets up, he says, "Okay, let me feed my turtle." He goes, grab a piece of salami, grabs some water. Okay, runs to school, comes back, he plays with the turtle again, obstacle course, all this stuff, and he's just still elated that he has a pet turtle. Well, day 3, same thing. Day 4, same thing. He's just so happy. Well, day 5 comes and he runs to school after feeding the turtle. He's still thinking about, like, gosh, I'm going to teach my turtle a trick, how to roll over. No, I'm kidding. So he gets home from school, he goes into his bedroom and the turtle's dead. And he goes, what in the world happened? And he can't figure out what happened to the turtle. And he goes to Mom and he says, "Mom, I had the pet turtle. I was feeding the pet turtle every day. I was taking care of him. And then he's dead. I don't know what happened." And Mom goes in the room and she's like, "Well, there's no signs of anything that happened to him. Well, let's go through your day. What were you doing with the turtle?" And I created this obstacle course. Well, was he okay? Did he fall? No, everything was fine. And then, I go to school, I give him some water, I give him a piece of salami, and then I close my door so he can't get out. And Mom says, "Wait a minute. Turtles don't eat meat. He died of starvation."
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Oh my goodness." Now, why do I tell that story? A lot of us are feeding the youth that we're trying to help the wrong thing. A lot of us don't understand that we have to meet our kids where they are. We have to be there for them. We can't take our experiences as a child, our experiences, even if we're somebody that was in the foster care system, and apply them 100% to each kid that we're working with, each youth that we're trying to impact. So understanding that you have to feed the kids, the youth, the right thing for them. Mm-hmm. If that turtle was a rabbit or a mouse or some other animal, it might have been okay.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it goes back to what Sarah was saying, understanding that often what you see is a result of behaviors that may have served them well in their previous life and protections that they have built up. And you've got to know that and recognize that. So, Shalina, if you could go back to a foster parent that was either one of the good ones or more likely perhaps one of the ones that could have been better, what would you say to them if you could now as the adult Shalina?
I would say that I feel could have done better. Now as an adult and a growing adult, I now understand that you were doing the best with what you thought was the best. And at the time, as a youth, I couldn't see that. Whether it was right, whether it was wrong, I've grown up and I'm growing up to be on the healing journey, which is another thing that I feel foster parents, prospective foster parents, you have to understand and take time when they're taking time with the youth they're dealing with to know that it's a healing process coming from trauma, going through trauma, revisiting trauma. For example, much of us, Dave is one of the authors as well for Dr. Kaiser's Faces of Foster Care. And much like our writings, we tend to rehash stuff that's like from the past and what we've been through. But I know of late, we've been on a more of a focus of let's find ways to teach somebody something or help them progress forward. Or yes, this happened here, but how are we growing with it? How are we finding purpose in it? How are we healing in it? And so they could have done better.
Mm-hmm.
I can now say that it was necessary. My journey with you was necessary because it added to my progression.
Interesting.
And then same thing for the group that I felt did phenomenal. Same thing. My season with that group also, it was necessary because it creates what I like to call your perseverance creates your story. So it created chapters in my life's book that I'm carrying forth to then help those that's beside us, around us, in front of us.
Okay.
So all was necessary. And I've learned a lot and I'm growing through a lot. So,
Sarah, what are some of the myths of foster care for children?
So that's a good one. I think about that quite often in my work. And I think people assume like we're just so broken, we can barely function, right? That we are going to come into your home and just turn it upside down, right? With all of these bad behaviors that we have. You know, we're a child, but we're also this package of damaged goods, right? Sent to your doorstep. And that's the one that like I can't help but to wear my research hat there. You know, research tells us, we know that there's evidence that says that a belief in some version of that myth, right? Like we've heard that said 800 different ways. Not only does that discourage potential foster parent recruitment, but it impacts retention as well because, you know, perceived bad behaviors, right? In my work at Basis, you know, we're working with counties. And I think one of the things that we're trying to do is equip our counties for their foster parent recruitment with the evidence to refute some of these myths and to support foster parents in this exact area. Shalina, I think you're so much more mature than I am because for me, it's like, hey, knowing is half the battle. And now it's time to do something about it. Like do better. Like we are equipped with what we need. We just need to move forward.
Yeah, I think Shalina may be more evolved than me as well. The forgiveness there was impressive.
No, let me say this. All of what y'all said has been necessary because it adds to your story. I'm no one up here so greater. It's just that we've all had different experiences. And as of now, I could say now I'm dealing with it. Now I'm trying to seek healing in it. But it hasn't been easy for me as well. Like there's been years where I would have cycles of stuff. And now that I'm facing that stuff, I can then progress in my healing journey. So I appreciate everybody. But no, I'm like you on a path.
Yeah, we'll take you off of our pedestal. Okay. All right. Dave, what about you? What's a myth about kids in foster care that you would like to dispel?
Wow. I mean, I'll kind of piggyback off of Sarah a little bit and say that everyone's not broken. There are some youth that are fine, that are, you know, probably struggling a little bit with the feeling of rejection because they're in the foster care system somehow, some way. But everyone's not a kid like me that, will come in and break windows and punch walls and beat your biological kids up and stuff. I mean, everyone's not violent. Everyone's not so damaged that they can't be fixed. But to caveat that a little bit, no matter how damaged they are, how traumatized they are, how hurt they are, they can be helped. I mean, I've seen some horror stories, working with youth in the foster care system. One young man comes to mind where I won't go into too much detail, but he was removed from the home because he was being sexually molested by his parents, one of his parents, only to be placed into a foster home that he was being sexually molested by both of the foster parents and recorded. These things happen. And you know what? This kid is doing great. We still keep in contact after 20 years, and he's had plenty of therapy, plenty of mentoring, plenty of, good adults in his life, but he's an EMT. He's training other EMTs right now. So I'm really proud of him. But yeah, I mean, there's some pretty bad situations sometimes they end up in, but they're not so destroyed that they can't be helped.
Mm-hmm. Goes back to your saying, all they need is the one caring adult.
My signature speech.
Yeah.
Right. We weren't broken. We were just traumatized. I love that you said that. It's not bad behavior. It's trauma.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Behavior should be viewed as a symptom. And when you view it as a symptom, it shifts the way you approach the behavior, which, as Dr. Kaiser was saying, or Kay was saying, is that punishment versus discipline. The heart of discipline is to see the root cause and to instruct. The heart of punishment is punishment. Kay, what myths would you like to dispel about children and youth in foster care?
I'm going to say teenagers, that they still need love, and that a lot of foster parents don't want to bring them into their home because someone has probably created a picture that they're not easily to care for or to parent. And so those children end up just being, I would say, in a sense, discarded, or they're like way down on the list. Like, no, I don't want to bring those children into my home. So that feeling of rejection, to me, that's just so unfair, not even giving a child a chance. I know of children right now, actually adults, but they're like 17 and 18 years old, and they still want to be adopted.
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised that. I think that our society in general, regardless of whether a youth is in foster care, we have such, I talk about myths, we have such a negative myth associated with adolescents. And, adolescents are troubled. They are going to be a pain in the rear. They're going to challenge us at every turn. Oh my gosh, just wait till they're teens, that type of mentality. But then you add on to that the fact that the kid is in foster care. And you're right. So many people are afraid to foster teens. And I love what you say. These kids want and need love just like any other child, if not more. Even if some want adoption, but some just want permanency, just a safe, understanding place.
Yes. And I wanted to share something too about when I teach. I've noticed that when students come into the classroom, there's always a class clown. But to be able to turn that class clown around and to put them on the straight path, once that student, and most of the time when they behave like that, I can figure out something's going on at home, or maybe they are in foster care. But all I do is I just say, well, will you be my teacher's helper for the day? All of a sudden, the class clown is no longer class clown.
Yeah, that's because he's a helper.
Because it's like, okay, and then I tell them that I'm going to leave a good note for them, for their teacher, to let them know that you helped me today.
Yeah. Yes. For this kid, it may be one of the few good notes he ever gets. Let me interrupt this interview one more time to tell you, or to thank, actually, the Jockey Being Family Foundation for their support for this podcast and for their support for our free online courses. The courses are terrific. They are 1 hour. They're asynchronous. You take them online by yourself. They come with a certificate of completion if you need that. And they're really focused on parenting. So check out these courses at bit.ly/JBF support. That's bit.ly/JBF support. So I would like to end by assuming that our listeners are people who may be considering being foster parents. What should they consider to help them decide if they are the right fit to be foster parent? What do they need to look inward to themselves to say, is this something that I can do? Shalina, take us off.
2 things. I believe if the youth is not in a place to talk for themselves, then really getting with their guardian ad litem, their social worker, and really sitting down to really understand the dynamics and assessing with your family and individually how you could be the best fit for that youth. If the youth is of age and, of course, present with the social worker and our CASA representative, potentially doing an interview, allow the youth to ask their questions and have a friendly sit down and interview each other. The reason why I'm saying that is because, once again, my very last foster home, when I came in there, I already had walls up because of whatever I just came from. And already in my mind, I was defeated, thinking, oh, she's going to think all this crazy stuff about me, this negative stuff, because this is where I just came from. And it was none of that. She looked me in my eye. She told me to walk around the house to see if that's somewhere I wanted to stay. And she said to me, quote, whatever you've done is in the past. And if you choose to stay here, that's in the past. And that started my journey towards diving into school, finding achievement, going to college, finding achievement in others. So many of you said y'all had when we was going through the rounds of what positive, that was my positive. Mm-hmm. Like the speaking life, the words that we use, speaking life into someone. I like how Dr. Kaiser says the class clown, she basically finds a way to utilize them in a positive way, because then that allows them to then say, hey, I'm not acting out because I want attention. Somebody's actually paying attention. And now I'm having a good rapport. So, yeah.
Sarah, if you could speak to, which you are speaking to, potential foster parents, what do they need to look inward and say, what do I need to bring to this table to know that I can be the best foster parent for any children coming into my home?
I'm glad you said that. That was like my number one note is self-reflection. So, I would say to them, spend some time in self-reflection, thinking about, what are my motivations? What do I hope to achieve out of this experience? And am I willing to put in the work? And it does take work, right? To create a trauma-informed home and environment. And think about, do I want to build lifelong relationships, and can I adjust to the ebb and the flow of that relationship? Because there is a lot of uncertainty from the foster parent's perspective. And I would also say that I think while those things sound heavy, they're very worthwhile. You have to spend the time thinking about that. But also, on the other hand, know that parenting, no matter the circumstance, requires resilience. I have a 15-year-old who has experienced zero trauma so far on this planet. And I promise you, she gives me a run for my money on the daily. Like, no matter what, as parents, we need to build resiliency. And that's the best part. It's a skill that we can help each other learn. It's something that we can develop over our lifetime. And I would say, if you've ever thought of fostering, I really hope that you will. We all have a part to play in this system. We share this community around us. And with that comes a responsibility to support our most vulnerable members. And then also, I would put in a plug, if you feel like fostering is not for you for whatever reason, I encourage you to accept that. I wouldn't want someone to go into it not fully prepared, but think about other ways that you can help. How can you support a foster family in your community? Could you maybe be someone to provide extra mentorship or guidance to a foster child in your community? There is space for everyone in the field of child welfare.
On that note, which was a wonderful summation, thank you so much, Shalina Tate, Dr. Kay Kaiser, Dave Armstrong, and Dr. Sarah Dyson for being with us today. I so appreciate your wisdom. I truly do. And I hope that this reaches a lot of would-be foster parents as well as encouraging those who are currently foster parents. Thank you all so much for your time with us today. I truly appreciate it.